Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. So today's video, I forgot to film the intro for this before I sent it off, but today's video is going to be how I made this kangaroo commission. It's currently over getting shipped to the States, so I don't know how long it's going to take for him to get there, but anyway, I'm starting off with a resin cast of a sculpture I have sculpted, molded in silicone and then cast in resin. And I'm going to be painting all of these areas in black, the ones that are going to be visible without the fur showing. So for this one, I'm going to do some painted eyes. Kangaroos have pretty dark black eyes. So I'm just going to be painting these because you can get quite a good reflective surface on it if you use some varnish. So I'm using sorry for the blurry focus. So I'm using a water-based acrylic paint from the brand Chromacryl, and I usually prime my resin before I paint it. And I use just a canvas primer that you can get in a local craft store. It's from Derivian Matisse is the brand that I use. And the same deal for the feet as well. So something I've sculpted. I originally sculpted them in Monster Clay, I believe. Could have been Sculpey, but anyway, I ended up molding it in silicone and then casting it in resin. And then the same deal with the painting as what I did for the face. You don't have to be too careful with the painting if you're going to be applying faux fur to your resin, but if you are just leaving it as a resin piece or a clay piece, just try and be a bit more careful with your painting skills, not like me, but because I'm covering it in faux fur, that I don't need to be too careful, and it saves a little bit of time when you're painting. So I usually leave this to dry overnight and I give it a couple of coats of paint. Moving on to the faux fur. So this faux fur is pretty much a last of what I have. So I'm just sort of trying to work out the best way to put these patterns on the last of the fabric, so I don't have to sew bits together or anything, and that just fit. So the patterns that I've made myself. I have a pattern tutorial on my Patreon if you're interested in how I make them, but yeah, I just create them using baking paper. So this is the fur that I'm going to be using. It has a different underpile, so I'm going to be trimming all of this orangey brown colour off to keep the colour of the pile underneath, because the customer wanted like a reddish sort of version of one that I previously made. So this was the perfect fur to make, and luckily I had just enough to make it. So I'm using a small pair of sharp scissors to cut out all of the pieces. You want to get your blades in between the pile of the faux fur and the backing, that way you won't chop any of the pile off, but in this case it wouldn't have mattered anyway because I'm going to be trimming the whole thing to get rid of that brownie colour. And then once I've cut it all out, I can pin it together. So I'll be using a sewing machine for this body. You don't have to use this technique, but for this body I am using a sewing machine. So I'm going to pin it first side together and then sew it up on the sewing machine. I prefer to use the machine just because it's a little bit stronger and way quicker than hand sewing some things. But you know, both techniques, whether you're hand sewing things or sewing it on the sewing machine, they both have pluses and minuses about their techniques. But yeah, this way is just a hell of a lot faster than hand sewing things, and I kind of hate sewing, so yeah, if I can perfect this technique a bit more, then yeah, by all means. But if you like hand sewing, yeah, try it out the other way. So this is what it looks like when I've sewn all of the areas up. So I usually leave the back end open so I can flip it the right way around. In this instance, I've left the legs open because they're quite small, so it needs some space to be able to flip it the right way around. I've also left the neck area open as well. So there'll be quite a bit of hand sewing on these dolls anyway, but majority of the body is sewn by the sewing machine. Get yourself a good quality thread as well. I use Gutermann thread. It's by far the best thread that I've used, and I've used lots of different threads. So if you can get your hands on something like that, or even upholstery thread that's thicker again, definitely get your hands on some of them because it makes a hell of a difference when you're sewing things using a ladder stitch. You can pull it a lot tighter, and it keeps the seam a lot more closed. So I'm just flipping the kangaroo body the right way around. Not a big deal. Sometimes it's a bit difficult to do, but in this instance it was pretty easy because I'd left the holes quite big to be able to flip it. So this is what it looks like when it is the right way around. It just kind of looks like a big fluffy thing. But you can sort of see the shape starting to take shape. Once that's done, I create a armature. So this is a combination of a ball and socket armature for the spine, and then I've used aluminium wire for the legs and the arms. I have ball and socket pieces in my shop if you're interested in that, and also a tutorial of the wire armature in my shop as well. So it comes as a video and a PDF tutorial if you're interested in that. So once that's done, I can attach all of the pieces, all the resin pieces to the armature, and then I can start gluing and sewing things up. So I'm using a tacky fabric glue to first adhere the neck area to the head, and that way I have like a base that's solid, and then I can start working around the body to sew it all up and glue it all together. So like I said before, I'm using a ladder stitch to sew up all of the areas that are open. Usually I use just white thread unless it's like a dark color of the faux fur, but you usually don't see the thread anyway, so you don't need to be too pedantic about getting the same colored thread. And then once I've sewn this all up, I use some polyfill to stuff my dolls. I've also dabbled with doing needle felting as well, but majority I use polyfill, which is the same sort of filling that you find in like couch cushions and stuff like that, and you can get it at your local craft store for relatively cheap for a big bag. Here in Australia you can get it at Spotlight as well. So this is what it looks like all sewn up. You can see in desperate need of a trim. Kangaroos aren't that fluffy. So once that's done, I can let everything dry and then give it a good trim, apply some fur to the base. So you can see the colour of the faux fur is completely different from what it looked like before. Kangaroos have really interesting fur. It's more like a wool, I guess, rather than long fur, so I thought the pile for this faux fur worked really well for a kangaroo. So once that fur has been applied to the face, I leave it to dry again overnight to make sure everything is adhered properly, and then I can start adding all little details to the face, including any shading around the eyes, and whiskers and stuff like that. So just going in again with that chromacryl paint. Sometimes I'll use some fabric paints if there's specific things that need to be put onto the face or the body or anything, but I have plenty of videos going into detail what I use for any patterns and shading and stuff on my YouTube for free. And yeah, so again, applying that to the face and also feet and hands if there's anything. I always have a reference photo over to my side if I'm doing a realistic animal as well, just so I can make sure that all of the details are right and I can kind of replicate it in my dolls. So once all the shading's done and I'm happy with the way everything's looking, I can then start adding whiskers. So I have a whiskers tutorial as well as available in my shop, and also on my Patreon if you're interested in how I do the whiskers. So this little one already has found a home. I have some dolls in my shop if you are looking for something, and I might be open for another commission or two, so feel free to message me on my shop as well at Creatures of Nat. You can also check me out on Instagram and Facebook at Creatures of Nat, and also thank you to my Patreons for supporting me. I really appreciate it, and if you want to join, you can find the link in my description. So I'll catch you in the next one. Bye!